Stonehenge, Britain's wonder of the world, surely the most iconic and mysterious structure ever constructed in the British Isles.
For generations, people have argued over its origin, its meaning, and its purpose.
But now a team of dedicated archaeologists have made an astonishing discovery, one that really is going to have us rewriting the prehistory books.
We've been following an extraordinary archaeological investigation in West Wales that's been ongoing for the last decade. Using the latest science and good old-fashioned grit, they've unearthed the remains of another immense stone circle, dismantled just before Stonehenge was created.
They may have uncovered the true origins of Britain's most famous monument. This is the story of the lost circle of Stonehenge.
On the high plateau of Salisbury Plain stands Stonehenge, the most iconic prehistoric monument in Europe. Built thousands of years ago by Stone Age people, whose story is now long forgotten.
Standing here in the shadow of these huge stones, these megaliths, you can't help but be in awe of those ancient builders. Like so many people, I've long been entranced by the magic and the mystery of Stonehenge. I remember coming here as a child and wondering what it was, what it was for, and thinking that somebody must have the answer. And then realizing that actually, that mystery has carried on, and archaeologists have spent whole lifetimes trying to get to the bottom of it.
But all that is changing. Archaeologist Mike Parker-Pearson leads a team that has been transforming our understanding of these ancient stones.
Although my work involves many different aspects, many different countries, Stonehenge, I think, really got its hooks into me. As an archaeologist, you can't not be interested in Stonehenge.
Mike's interest is centred not on the huge sarsen stones that dominate the structure, but on the often overlooked bluestones.
The bluestones are much smaller than the great big stones of Stonehenge. They're generally not much bigger than the human frame.
Despite their size, Mike's excavations in the early 2000s revealed that they are central to the Stonehenge story.
When Stonehenge started out, it looked very different to how it looks now.
The monument we see today dates to around 2500 BC. But Mike's team confirmed the existence of numerous empty stone holes, evidence that the stones have been rearranged multiple times. The original configuration, dating from around 3000 BC, was an enormous circle made entirely of bluestones.
So this was a major surprise. We'd always thought that the first Stonehenge was just a monument of earth, a ditch and a bank, but it had actually been a stone monument right from the beginning.
The bluestones were the original Stonehenge. For Mike, this revelation was the start of a new quest.
To understand Stonehenge, the secret is in the bluestones, to find out where they came from and why.
There is an ancient myth about Stonehenge, first recorded in the Middle Ages. It tells of the wizard Merlin, who led men far to the west, to Ireland, to the land of giants, where he found the stones and, using his magical powers, transported them to England.
The Merlin myth is clearly fantastical, but myths can contain within them a grain of truth, a fact that's been passed down through generations and become embroidered and embellished over time. So within this tale of wizards and giants and magical stones, could there be a foundation in actual history?
There is something about the Bluestones that sets them apart.
Because these Bluestones are different to their larger companions, the Sarsens. And the reason for that difference is that they are not from round here.
The Bluestones actually come from the far west. It's not Ireland, but it's almost there. It's West Wales.
A century ago, archaeologists realised that the Bluestone rock originated in the Preseli Hills of Pembrokeshire, almost 150 miles west of Salisbury Plain. To understand why Stonehenge was built with stones from so far away, Mike headed to the Preseli Hills on a search for their birthplace. Little did he know that he would discover something even more extraordinary. That the Bluestones of Stonehenge originally formed an even more ancient, long-lost monument, and that their secret history would revolutionise our understanding of the origins of Stonehenge. In 2010, Mike began his Welsh investigations.
To get the answers he was looking for, Mike wanted to pinpoint the precise origin of the Bluestones, the exact quarry where they were hewn from the rock. And that was going to be an enormous challenge because the Preseli Hills cover a vast area.
The hills are peppered with countless outcrops of volcanic rock, any one of which could be the source of the Stonehenge Bluestones. In the 20th century, based on visual similarities in the rocks, archaeologists had made a crude match with a couple of southern outcrops. But Mike wasn't convinced. To be sure he dug in the right place, he decided to call on the latest scientific techniques. Geologist Richard Bevins has mapped and sampled hundreds of Preseli outcrops. Each one is unique.
Examining the rocks of this area, there are subtle differences. You have to have experienced a lot of exposure to spot the minor differences which become critical.
Richard's database would be crucial, but it alone was not enough. Mike and Richard would turn to the latest advances in geochemistry, aided by Jane Evans.
The idea that we might be able to use these methods to pin down the absolute origin, possibly, of some of these rocks was a fascinating challenge. I don't think that it's ever been used in the archaeological context before, so I think this was a first.
Bluestone samples from both Stonehenge and the Preseli outcrops were pulverised, transformed into the finest sand, then panned like gold to separate out the minerals.
We can look at the chemical compositions of small crystals for lots of different elements and then we can do a matching of those elements, almost like a fingerprint.
A key fingerprint marker was zircon, nature's geological clock.
Zircon is a very robust mineral that never gets affected by geological processes and is therefore very good for dating rocks.
From the moment zircon is formed, the radioactive uranium atoms inside it decay at a steady rate into lead. By measuring the ratio of uranium to lead in a sample of rock, you can calculate its precise age, creating a unique signature. The results were game-changing. Using zircon and other markers, the previously identified southern outcrops were discounted, and 2 new outcrops took their place.
That was a really exciting moment. What the geologists had discovered was not just that archaeologists and geologists had been looking in the wrong place for the best part of 100 years, but that here was somewhere where we could actually find the quarry where monoliths were extracted.
The team had discovered the source of Stonehenge's bluestones. Reality was replacing myth. The archaeologists were getting closer to the true story of the original Stonehenge and its ancient builders.
Mike and his team had taken a huge step forward. They'd found the precise locations that the bluestones originated from. They'd found their X on the treasure map, and in fact more than one X, and now it was time to dig.
In 2014, the archaeologists started excavating in earnest at the outcrops of Craigrosservellen and the imposing Carn Goedog. Mike had put together a team of professional archaeologists, students and volunteers. And our camera team was there to document the highs and lows of this archaeological odyssey.
We've got a date for 153, and it's everything above that.
It wasn't long before they started to turn up evidence to confirm what the geology had indicated. Clear signs of quarrying out of bluestone pillars. In fact, some of the evidence was there in plain sight.
What we've got here are pillars that have actually been detached, ready to go. One here, one there, and they're really like a pack of cards that have slipped. 1, 2, 3. Just here, we have a wedge mark where somebody has chiseled just at that point when these two were at the same height to actually split them off. And that must have been the moment when that fissure opened right up that this stone slid downwards.
At the base of the outcrop, the team uncovered strangely positioned stones, looking very much like a bluestone pillar production line.
These provide lots of pivot points so that you can actually swing and tip the pillar so the bluestone can then be balanced onto here, and then we've got one end on this trestle and another one on this one, and then you're poised to get the bluestone away and down to the valley.
So how did the stones get to Salisbury Plain? The archaeologists who had placed the quarries on the southern slopes of the Preseli Hills thought that to avoid a trek over the high peaks, a sea route seemed most logical, with the stones travelling by boat for the majority of their journey east.
There's been a lot of support for the sea transport theory. The difficulty is that at 3000 BC, we don't think that they had particularly sturdy boats that could hold these multi-ton stones, 2 or 3 tons. It's a very risky prospect indeed. to manoeuvre a large megalith over water. It was tried in 2000, a Millennium project, and the stone sank within half a mile of leaving land.
But Mike's new quarries were on the northern slopes of the hills, reigniting support for an alternative theory.
I think that there's a much more plausible possibility that they took those stones as far as they could by land. There's a much more feasible land route from the north side, going around the Preselis, and then picking up the natural routeways that have been formed by the system of valleys in South Wales. It's actually the route taken by the modern A40 today.
Dragging these stones, each the size and weight of a small car, almost 150 miles, seems a staggering feat for Stone Age people. So how did they do it? James Dilley and Luke Winter are experimental archaeologists.
The Neolithic period has a very small amount of fragmentary evidence, and what we can do with experimental archaeology is to start filling those gaps.
They create and construct using materials and techniques available to Stone Age people.
So the tools that we found in archaeology may appear simple, they're just rocks, some are sharp, some are pointy, but actually they've been very carefully made. They've selected raw materials that lend their characteristics to work really well. So the stone blade is actually housed inside this piece of red deer antler here. And the protein that makes up this antler is so tough and strong that it's not going to break. I would have to put this under huge force to actually break this. So it's really such a great material to be using as carpentry.
Here at the Ancient Technology Centre, they're experimenting with whether the bluestones could have been transported on a wooden sled.
The Neolithic we think of as the Stone Age, which it is, classified from the stone tools we find, but of course the majority of the things that were being made and built in that period were actually made from wood and from organic materials. The stone we're fitting the cradle around today is about 1.2 tons, and the bluestones that came from Preseli, they range in size from around 1.2 to about 3.2 tons. So this is the smaller end of the scale for the bluestones. So this is called a tusk tenon joint. We have clear, really solid evidence for this type of joint from the Neolithic. When it goes together, it's still reasonably loose. And the thing that tightens it is the peg that drives through the hole. And then that becomes a solid unit. And that's how it works.
Experimental archaeology has demonstrated just how effective a wooden sled can be.
You can see we've got two ends of the rope running up the field. We're going to split you down 15 on each side.
Today we're going to attempt to pull this with school children. Obviously, we doubt whether the Preseli stones were moved by children. We don't know that, but we assume teams of adults, muscular, strong, fit people. So it's a real test.
So everyone's got a good firm grip on the rope. Yep, no half measures, good firm grip. 3, 2, 1, pull! Go, go, go! Go, go, go! Zone 1, tell us when to stop. Stop! Okay, drop the rope and give yourselves a big round of applause.
I thought that was fantastic. So that was just pulled. So that's nearly 1.5 tons with the timber frame, and that was pulled by 30 13-year-olds. We probably did 35, 40 metres up the slope, and it's up an incline. And I think, once again, it sort of shows that this theory works. You can pull a heavy weight on a sled on raw ground without the need for huge timber arrangements and sleeper trackways or rollers. And actually, it was really surprising how efficient it became. Half the team didn't even seem to be pulling much, but fantastically successful.
1, 2, 3, yay!
The quarry excavations have revealed the techniques and ingenuity of these Neolithic people, and experimental archaeology has shown how the multi-ton bluestones could have been transported over land. But back at the quarries, the archaeologists also unearthed a puzzle, sparked by the charred remains of a Neolithic snack. At the Grossevelin quarry, the team excavated hazelnut shells from around a Stone Age fire pit.
More than 5,000 years ago, somebody was sitting just around here, eating some hazelnuts for their lunch, just as I am, throwing the shells into the fire. It's an astonishing detail of Neolithic life, and I love those beautiful moments frozen in time. But these hazelnuts introduced such a twist into our story.
The charred hazelnut shells were gathered up and radiocarbon dated, and the results caused a stir. The hazelnuts had been burned around 3,300 BC, suggesting the bluestones had been quarried almost 4 centuries before Stonehenge was constructed.
That leaves us with a mystery, because where did they go? Did it take them 400 years to haul those stones to Stonehenge? I suspect not. I think that there's another place, maybe close by, that these stones were initially destined for.
Could the Stonehenge Bluestone Circle have originally stood in Wales? The Merlin myth tells not just of stones, but of an existing stone circle in the west, a monument called the Giant's Dance. Perhaps there was more than one grain of truth in the legend. Did the Giant's Dance once stand in the Preseli Hills? After all, this is a land of giants, a land of megaliths.
This is a dolmen, the Pentra Ivan dolmen. It's all that remains of what was once a tomb. And at the heart of it is this enormous capstone that I'm slightly nervous about standing underneath, because that is 16 tons of stone balanced on 3 uprights. They're narrow at the top. We've got that huge weight of stone lifted up and then just held up there in this beautifully simplistic way at those 3 points of contact. And this is very early. This dates to centuries before Stonehenge. And what we can see is that the people here in Preseli, the Neolithic people here, had some engineering skills. I mean, this is impressive even by modern standards, isn't it? This is the most impressive dolmen, but it's not the only one. This is a landscape of monumental megalithic architecture.
There have long been signs that the Neolithic people of the West were skilled stonemasons. Farming originated at the beginning of the Neolithic in the Near East. Archaeological and now genetic studies show how farmers spread west across Europe, around the coasts and along major rivers. These 2 routes are reflected in the DNA of the first farmers arriving in Britain around 4000 BC. The farmers in the western Atlantic edge of Europe, maybe influenced by the rocky landscapes they inhabited, developed a distinct culture, marked by building huge stone monuments. From Spain and France up through Cornwall and Wales to Ireland and Cumbria, there are the remains of large numbers of huge dolmens and other stone tombs built by those early Neolithic communities. Monuments largely absent in the less rocky east of Britain. A stone circle in West Wales fits the pattern. As well as the obvious dolmens, the landscape around the quarries is scattered with standing stones, most of unknown age. But there was no obvious place for Mike to start his new search.
How on earth would we find not just a stone circle, but a stone circle that had been taken down? In other words, we were looking for something that would no longer exist above ground. And that's a big ask. That's a real needle in a haystack. And for a long time, I thought, what are the chances? Very, very slim.
To see the invisible, Mike once again turned to the latest technology. Aerial photographs were studied, and aerial photogrammetry was employed to map sites of interest. From the photos, 3D models could be created, revealing hidden features in the Preseli landscape. Promising sites could then be investigated by the geophysics team. They employed ground-penetrating radar alongside magnetometry, picking up tiny magnetic traces in the soil left by the heat of ancient hearths.
It's a fantastic technique because it enables us to cover these very large areas quite quickly, and it can identify if there are actually monuments or maybe houses, ditches, pits, etc., that are often associated with the prehistoric archaeology we're looking for.
Among the scattered standing stones, they were looking hard for traces of a circular monument, something that could have been the original Bluestone Circle. The data suggested many promising sites, but one stood out in a field called Pensarn.
It's a low mound, but it could be a prehistoric monument. And from that period of the Neolithic, we know that some of these mounds had surrounds of standing stones. Now, of course, we're a stone's throw in that direction from the main bluestone quarry. We're a stone's throw from the smaller one. So this is the perfect position. So who knows what we're about to find there.
Encouraged by the scans, the search for the lost circle began.
Stone circles are generally quite easy to find. They've got whacking great stones in them. What we are looking for is the depressions and the hollows that were left by the removal of the stones. But also, don't just find a hole in the ground, you have to find a hole with evidence of a stone being removed. So we're looking for pits of a certain sort of size in a certain formation with certain characteristics. And it's not easy.
I think this could work, isn't it? Yeah?
But it seemed the luck was in, just below the surface, stone holes.
We're looking at features, they're the size of the bluestone holes at Stonehenge.
And then there was more.
So what Lisa's just uncovered is that we have a pit for a stone, a standing stone. It's got a packing in it, but totally unexpected, it's got the broken off stump of the bluestone sitting in it. So this is the first direct evidence that these really are stone holes. Marvellous. We may have done it.
And that wasn't all. In a nearby field, the geophysics team made a new discovery.
What we found here is something very exciting. We've got these big rings within the data sets, and what we think they might be related to are circular enclosures, some of which are quite large, up to 40 metres across.
This could be not just one, but a whole complex of small stone circles. All the activities sparked the interest of the locals. Mike's talks at the neighbourhood microbrewery were packed.
I think that is where the stone that ended up at Stonehenge was taken from. Now, today...
The dig is very popular. We have gate posts that are huge standing stones, or were once standing stones. We've got standing stones in our fields that we mow around in tractors, and, you know, they are everywhere. And you can't help but wonder why, you know, what was it about this area?
The late 3000s.
It's what we do this for,
So we opened...
just to tell the story. They're really engaged. It's their landscape, it's where they live. You know, it's what happened under their feet 5,000 years ago, you know, where they walk.
We came up with a new IPA, which is now one of our core beers. We thought we would call it Hammerstone IPA. So could you guess who the image is based on?
The team were on a high. But were they any closer to solving the mystery? It was now 2017. Mike had been investigating the Preseli landscape for 7 years. But as the new season began, the mood was sombre.
The digs were going badly. One by one, those new, promising sites were turning out to be duds.
The elation of the previous year had been replaced by doubt. Radiocarbon dating had revealed the Pensarn Circle was in fact bluestone surrounds for a Bronze Age tomb, 1,000 years too late for Stonehenge. Their hopes now lay in the excavations of the new circles detected by Kate's geophysics team. But as the dig progressed, the likelihood that they were Neolithic was fading fast. The stone artefacts they found were uninspiring.
Someone's thought, I can make that into an axe.
Because the shape was already...
Basically got, you know, what you might call trimming flakes taken off both directions to give it the crudest of edges. This is really scraping the barrel.
The team realised this was not a Neolithic circle, but an Iron Age settlement. Once again, they were thousands of years off.
You think that has to be it. It has to be it. Perfect prehistoric circular monuments. And you think, yes, this is it. And even though it's tremendous archaeology, and anybody would be privileged to dig it, it's not what you're looking for.
Whether we're ever going to find that stone circle, that former stone circle, that first Stonehenge, I'm afraid, doubtful. At that point, I was disappointed. I thought that maybe we're not going to find whatever it is. Maybe it never really existed.
The season was almost over. And they'd now exhausted every site on their list, except one.
The team's last hope was an unpromising collection of 4 bluestones at a site called Wine Mound. Government archaeologists had surveyed this place a century ago and said it was very small and unremarkable. And they weren't wrong.
We'd have given up, really, on Wine Mound because the geophysics hadn't really produced very much. Didn't pick up anything. No sign of other holes where stones might have once stood. but there's nowhere else to look.
The team decided to give it one last go, with spades and shovels, working blind, and the weather didn't help.
It is fairly extreme archaeology. The weather isn't fantastic. We are bailing water out of holes, which will eventually again fill with rain. I got sent to Wine as a bit of a forlorn hope. It's wet, it's exposed, the wind never stops up there. The students were rebellious, and we were all very tired. We didn't expect to find anything, but you can't just chuck the job in. This is terrible, the weather's bad, let's go home. You have to excavate it.
Sending Dave up the top of the hill to Wine Mound was the last throw of the dice. It was last chance saloon. But I'm glad we did, because it changed everything.
What's this? It's definitely a fill. That looks fantastic. We found this potential stone hole. As well as colour, which is darker, it's also a completely different texture. It's softer, it's more organic, and it's clearly been disturbed. So you look for more, and we found another one at the other end of the arc. When you start finding multiple stone holes with missing stones, that's the time to start getting excited. Mike's madcap idea actually had legs.
Where technology had failed, hard graft had led to a breakthrough. But there was more to be done. The following year, the team concentrated all their resources at Wine Mound. With the geophysical techniques useless in this marshy ground, finding the holes relied on experienced eyes and ears.
It's the texture that's really crucial, and the sound that it makes. When you tap the natural, you tap the fill, there's a much hollower sound, an element of a drum to it. It echoes a bit. They are not easy to find, but once you find them, you very definitely know they're there.
As one hole after another was unearthed, the shape of the circle was revealed. And its dimensions got the team excited.
Its diameter, 110 metres, was exactly the same as the outer perimeter around Stonehenge. The chances of the two having exactly the same dimensions are really very slim. Wine Mound could be the predecessor for Stonehenge.
But they needed more proof. Could they find evidence of a direct connection between the two monuments? An odd-shaped stone hole provided an opportunity to once again use photogrammetry.
We could see the exact shape of the base of each stone that had stood in them. And one of them was very unusual because it had a slightly kind of pentagonal cross-section. And what was interesting was that there was one at Stonehenge which had a very similar form.
Could they match the shape of the Wine Mound hole to the stone at Stonehenge? It fitted like a key in a lock. But this evidence alone was not conclusive. They still didn't know when the circle was constructed. Was it really Neolithic, built before Stonehenge? The acidic soil had destroyed almost all organic matter that could otherwise have been radiocarbon dated. So Mike called on the specialist services of Tim Kinnaird.
So we've got the section covered now. So I've covered it in the black cover. So I'm going to go back under now. I'm going to clean back an additional 10 centimetres so that I can go in and start to sample.
Tim digs not for physical objects, but for soil itself, containing memories of ancient sunlight.
You can actually date sediments by measuring the remnant energy in the grains of quartz in that sediment since they were last exposed to light. And it's a technique normally used by geologists, optically stimulated luminescence. OSL, we call it for short. He has to collect the samples under darkness so he can be absolutely sure that the quartz grains within his block of soil have not been affected by light.
They hoped these samples of ancient soil would reveal when the stones were originally set in place. When bombarded by lasers in a lab, trapped electrons are released, revealing when the sample was last lit by ancient sunlight. But the analysis would take months. Until then, the team had to wait.
The previous digs had all looked promising until the dates came in and they were way out. So would the same fate befall the team's last chance? Everything hinged on that OSL result.
Finally, the results came through. The OSL data gave a likely construction date of around 3,300 BC. It was perfect.
Well, that was a pretty good moment. We had dated the thing and we knew that it was shortly before Stonehenge.
Fantastic news, absolutely fantastic. I am over the moon. Not just for myself and the team, but for Mike. It must have been a great weight off his mind that here he is, he's done it. His theory's right. He's bang on the money.
Stonehenge's secret history had been revealed. The lost circle had been found.
This brand new discovery by Mike and his team is phenomenal. Against the odds, they've managed to unearth a 5,000-year-old stone circle, one of the largest in Britain. And what it shows us is that the origins of Stonehenge are more intriguing and complex than we've ever imagined.
Mike's new discovery shows that Stonehenge was first built not on Salisbury Plain, but in the Welsh Hills, centuries earlier, by people who were steeped in a culture of megalithic architecture. But what was it for? We can only speculate. Mike's theory is that it was a place to venerate the dead.
Everything we've been learning about the megalithic monuments is that they represented, or even were considered to be, the ancestors. Whether they were components of tombs, whether they were single standing stones or stone circles. Stone is permanent, like the ancestors.
Mike believes it was not just a site for remembering the dead, but a marker of time. He calls in archaeoastronomer Clive Ruggles to examine the site.
Well, this is a total station, but what I'm using it for here is for measuring the azimuth of the sun, the bearing of the sun in the sky. we can work out where all the astronomical bodies, the sun or the moon or whatever we're interested in, rise and set and would have risen and set in the past.
Mike's theory is that Neolithic people aligned the circle to key times of the year linked to the position of the sun, the solstices.
They are the turning points of the year. So from the deep gloom of midwinter, the knowledge that actually the land will become warm and fertile again. And equally, midsummer is the peak of that fertility, and that it too is about to change as the days become shorter. So it's actually the movement of the sun. It's something that is utterly permanent and eternal, like the ancestors themselves.
Where the sun rises will have changed over the last 5,000 years by about the diameter of the sun. So if we're looking where the sun rose on the longest day then would be about a sun's diameter further to the north than it does now. And when it rises at midwinter, about the same further to the south. So we can make that correction.
Clive has found that Wine Mound stones do indeed show a solstice alignment. Two stones twisted at right angles align with the midsummer sun as it would have risen 5,000 years ago. Wine Mound was clearly a hugely important cultural site for the Neolithic people of the Preseli Hills.
But the discovery of this monument throws up a new question. Why were those stones uprooted and moved more than 140 miles away?
In the Merlin myth, the stone circle was stolen. Merlin came west with a large army. Could the people of the east and the stone builders of the west really have been at war? A war that would lead the Easterners to steal the Wine Mound circle. But here, the myth breaks down. Evidence for large-scale warfare at the time is as insubstantial as evidence for Merlin himself. Instead, Wine Mound may have been part of a new revolution that was bringing communities together. Stone circles only started appearing around 3300 BC, a new fashion taking off on the west coast of Britain. Wine Mound was in the forefront of this new monumental style, which Mike believes forms part of a greater cultural intertwining.
What's interesting was that differences were beginning to be erased, that actually people were using the same pottery, east and west. They were building the same kinds of monuments, new circular forms like henges and stone circles in east and west.
The later Eastern circles appear to have been inspired by their Western counterparts. But the Stonehenge Bluestone Circle was unique, not just inspired by the West, but built from Western stones. So if the Wine Mound monument wasn't stolen, how did it end up on Salisbury Plain?
There are clues that it was a different group of people that moved the stones, clues that were once buried right here beneath my feet.
Human bones. When Mike's team had excavated Stonehenge's outer circle, they'd unearthed thousands of pieces of cremated bone. These were burials from the very earliest stage of Stonehenge. But who were they? By analysing the strontium in human bones, archaeologists can determine where someone was living.
People talk about you are what you eat. Basically, the strontium isotope composition that you pick up is related to the composition of the food you eat. And the composition of the food you eat is related to the soil and the underlying geology.
When a team at Oxford University analysed the Stonehenge bones, they came up with a surprising result. A number of individuals from the earliest burials were not local. Jane Evans illustrates their results.
So you can see that here's Salisbury. We've now put in what would be a local value, and it highlights basically the areas that are chalk in southern England. So anybody with a value like that was probably certainly living there when that bone formed. However, some of them had higher values. The areas where those slightly higher values come from are typical of Wales. Those individuals could well have come from in and around southwest Wales.
This looks to me like a migration signal. This is the beginning of a group moving in, settling themselves on Salisbury Plain, and then their descendants continuing to live in that area.
The bones at Stonehenge suggest that these stones weren't stolen, but may have been brought by a group of people who themselves were moving east. But why would the people of the Preseli Hills move their precious stone circle to Salisbury Plain? What was special about this place before Stonehenge was here?
I'm standing on the avenue, which is a Neolithic trackway, and it's long been recognised as such. So this is not a new archaeological discovery, but what's underneath it is, because the archaeologists have found a natural feature that they believe held great significance for those prehistoric people.
A series of glacial channels in the chalk stretching hundreds of metres. 5,000 years ago, they would have been visible and perfectly lined up with the solstice sun. Today's Stonehenge is clearly aligned with this natural feature, an orientation it inherited in turn from the original Bluestone Circle.
So my guess is what we're looking at is people actually bringing their very identity, their ancestral identity with them to reposition themselves at one of the most important ceremonial complexes within Neolithic Britain.
Around 3000 BC, people from the Preseli Hills may have been drawn to the Salisbury Plain sacred site because of its natural solstice alignments, bringing their stone monument with them, perhaps again to remember their own ancestors and to mark the yearly cycle of the sun.
After the construction of the Bluestone Circle, this gathering place here on Salisbury Plain really took off. And over the next few hundred years, we enter the golden age of Stonehenge.
The erection of the Bluestone Circle may have inspired others who saw it, becoming the seed for the creation of even larger monuments. 2 miles from Stonehenge lies Durrington Walls, the largest Neolithic site ever discovered in Britain. At a time when settlements were rarely more than a house or two, it was a temporary home for thousands, a pop-up town full of builders. Around 2500 BC, they constructed a huge wooden circle, Woodhenge. The Bluestone Circle was repositioned, and the huge sarsen stones that now define it were added. Salisbury Plain now had two complementary sacred monuments.
The stone circle of Stonehenge was a place associated with the dead. Woodhenge was actually a place associated with the living.
We can only imagine how Neolithic people used these sites, gathering here for feasts, for rituals, perhaps for contemplation, beside a monument that would stand the test of time, with Welsh bluestones at its heart. But we now know Stonehenge began with that lost stone circle in the Welsh hills, now rediscovered thanks to Mike's determination. It's time for me to brave the weather and visit the birthplace of Stonehenge.
Oh, Mike, it's amazing to be here at Wonmount, and this is it. You've found the origin of Stonehenge.
We have indeed.
After all these years, you've been vindicated. Congratulations to you and all the team.
Thanks. And as you can guess from the weather conditions, some of it's been quite hard work.
Yeah. It is a real breakthrough. This is the most interesting new information about Stonehenge that I think has emerged during my lifetime.
I think this is really a new view of Stonehenge that we can take to understand that it's actually a second-hand monument in one way, but it's also the sense of bringing a monument and putting it somewhere else, not just collecting a few haphazard stones. And I think it does point to a really important moment in British prehistory when you've got some kind of linkage, maybe unification, that's actually forging permanent links between these different regions.
Like all archaeological discoveries, you've found something, you've solved a puzzle, but actually you've opened up many, many more questions at the same time. What's been discovered here on this hillside in West Wales has transformed our understanding of a distant age. We've seen evidence for a complex belief system and of connections between communities widely separated in the landscape. And then those beliefs and those connections are expressed in the creation of a stone circle, which is then dismantled and recreated. We knew the Bluestones came from Pembrokeshire, but we never knew why they were so special. We've gained an entirely new understanding of the inception of Stonehenge.
Inside the palace of the mythical Minotaur, Raiders of the Lost Past with Janina Ramirez, new series next Friday at 9. And discover what's at stake and how to make a difference. The Our Planet Now collection is streaming on BBC iPlayer.